Filmmaking is all about grabbing and holding attention so you can tell someone, somewhere, the story that you want to tell them. Duh. And what keeps people's attention is a mix of audio and visuals that you put across the screen. Sometimes this can be clean and simple compositions, and other times it can go a little wild. Like this. Hyperlapses are nothing new, but their implementation is something that can be really interesting. For filmmakers in the social media or commercial space, it is all about holding people's attention, and hyperlapses seem to be a pretty good way to do that. I first saw this used in this style in a Jacob Owens video, so for this, I just wanted to go a little bit deeper into how to get the best results. Okay, the first and most important thing is going to be your settings. It is how you achieve the motion blur, which is the key component to shooting these hyperlapses. So you're gonna set your shutter speed to like a 1/6 or 1/15, and then adjust your aperture accordingly. If you are shooting outside, you will probably need an ND filter. For the shoot that I was on, I was inside using the available light in these concert venues, so I ended up just bumping my aperture up to like an f16 and letting it rip. And remember, the lower the shutter speed, the more motion blur you're actually going to introduce. Then you're gonna wanna turn your respective camera to the fastest shooting mode, and boom, you hold down that shutter button, you start running around like a crazy person, and that's kind of the meat of it. For the hyperlapses that I shot, I was using a Canon EOS R. It's a great camera, I think like 4 years old now, but it doesn't shoot as quickly as some newer DSLRs, and also the autofocus wasn't great. Fortunately, because everything is so hectic, when I did lose focus, you don't really notice because of how quick everything moves and how jarring everything actually is. But if you have a newer camera that one, shoots faster and does have better autofocus, you're gonna have an even easier time doing this. Okay, the second thing to note here is basically movement and subject. To get motion blur, you need that movement. If you were just to hold still and shoot the shutter, it wouldn't have the same effect as you running super close to something or pulling away or moving the camera in some crazy fashion. I also like to give the camera kind of an FPV vibe, which really just means it's gonna be moving on more than one axis. So if I'm doing a push in, I might actually move the camera sideways as well and try to get it to have this kind of wavy motion effect. Here, I have my camera right here, and why don't I just go show you? Okay, it is about 1,000 degrees here in this lovely garage, so I'm gonna make this somewhat quick. Right now, I'm basically gonna shoot a hyperlapse of my surfboard in this kind of cool light. Point here is just for demonstration purposes. This goes to show you can kind of practice in any environment to get your settings dialed, so when you are on set, you have a better idea of how you're gonna do this. Right now, I am 1/6 for shutter speed, f10, ISO 320. Okay, let's see how this goes. First, I'm gonna get focused, like, basically where I'll be is like right there. Because these shots far away, they're so fast that you're not as worried about it being out of focus. So again, if you have a newer camera with good autofocus, you can just rock autofocus. This camera is a little too old, I would say. Okay, and here I go. All right, that was the first one. You can see there, I'm basically just holding the shutter the entire time. I just did a little orbit around the board. What's sick here now too is you can actually just review. I swoop around, and back up. Okay, not bad. Okay, so now let's hop into Premiere Pro, and I'll show you how I would import these photos so that it's the easiest to work with. There are a lot of ways you could do this. This is just the workflow I use that works for me. And if you don't have a workflow, then it will probably work for you too. Okay, let's dive in. So here I have Premiere Pro open. I'm gonna go here, right click, import. When I go to import, I'm gonna navigate to where I'm keeping my photos. I'll go to day 2. Now, really interesting note here is that you need to make sure these are in sequence. So you can see here that they're the same file name, and then 49, 50, 51, all the way down to 106. So the important thing is that they are in order, because what you're going to do is you're going to hit options and you're going to click this image sequence. Then you're going to select the very first photo and hit import. Another thing here is that you can notice that these are JPEGs, not RAW files. So if you shoot RAW, that's great, but you'll need to put them into Premiere and then export, and just make sure when you export, you basically have a file name and then a sequence attached to it, which I'll show you here in a second. So I'm gonna hit import. It imports the files, and now you can see here, it's just called the first photo. You could rename this to, Hyperlapse. Cool. And then what you could do here is actually go to modify, interpret footage, slow that down to 24, drag it over. So my computer is pretty slow. This is a 2017 5K iMac. I am due for a new computer, so I have to render this bad boy. Hopefully you have a new computer where you can just play right through this. But first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna resize. So depending on how big the photos are, you can resize. I think like a 65 would be fine. Boom. And then also I'm just gonna add some quick adjustments. I'm just gonna increase some exposure, maybe throw like a light color adjustment on there, just so I have something going on. And then I'm gonna render. Okay, so now that we've rendered, let's play this back. This is with no adjustments. This is just dropping the clip straight into my timeline. Okay, let's hit play. I mean, you can just see it already looks sick. That is every photo basically I shot before the concert as they were setting up. These are those photos. So you can see here there's good motion blur, there's some movement, and yeah, overall looks pretty good, just straight up, like without me really doing too much tweaking. So what I would do now is I would actually go through and break apart each little clip. So I've done that actually already. You can see here, basically I've made cuts where a new kind of hyperlapse thing starts. So here's night one of the shows, and I basically made cuts so that I can kind of splice them up on my own. Now what you could do is just import them separately, so you could have different file names for each hyperlapse you shot. I find it easier just to put the whole darn thing in here and cut it up later. Either way, it looks pretty sick, and I'm pleased with the results. Okay, and so now let's dive into what you can do to kind of spice up these hyperlapses. The whole point of these is to give you that multimedia feel, a little bit of mixed media to make your video, your commercial, your ad, your whatever a little more interesting. And here are a few ways you can do that. The first is playing with the speed duration in post. This is kind of how I either slow down or speed up the hyperlapse. Slowing it down is obviously going to give you more space between each photo, and oftentimes I find myself hovering around a 75% for my desired look. The second thing is going to be reversing the clip, so you can play it forward and play it backward. Reversing is just going to give you that little extra texture. It also just helps you play with the direction. If you want things to kind of flow into each other, you can choose all one direction. So playing with the reverse feature with speed duration is also great. The third thing is just to shoot on a wider lens. A wider lens is going to give you more movement, and it's going to show more of that motion as you're running around through your scene. Compared to a tighter lens, which isn't going to show as much. So if you want more motion blur, and as well as just a better chance of keeping your subject in the center of the frame and having your footage appear more stable, then a wider lens is going to be best. All right, before we close out this video, I want to do a quick plug for this mic right here. This is the Joby WaveoPod mic. And you can see that in the beginning of this video, I was using a Shure mic plugged straight into my camera. That mic hovers around $250 if I'm not mistaken. And then for the rest of the video, including this right here, I'm recording on the Joby WaveoPod, which is about $100 mic. It's $99. If you are a YouTuber, a filmmaker, a creator, if you are on Zoom a lot, which I know we all are, then I would suggest checking out this mic because it's such a good value. The Shure mic is obviously great, but at $250, I'm not sure a lot of people can justify spending that much money on a mic. This right here, sub $100, and sounds pretty dang good. And if you can't really tell the difference between the intro audio and this audio, then that just goes to show that this mic is pretty great. That was just a quick plug for the budget-friendly products, because that's a lot of what we talk about on this channel, is doing the most amount of production with the least amount of gear and the least amount of money spent on gear just in general. Oh, And now I hear my son crying, so that's word to wrap up the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna go feed my kid a bottle, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.